in South Korea.
All right, good afternoon. This is Christian from Hertz, Tribeca Trade Group with your end-of-day recap for Wednesday. And, well, let's go over the major indices for the day. And then we'll talk about today's option activity. I kind of chuckling a little bit because, yeah, a crazy day of market action. You know, we kind of woke up and it was global risk off. A lot of the international markets were down quite large today, just to kind of give you a sense. I actually didn't see where Europe finished on the day, but they were hit pretty hard. Yeah, they came back pretty nicely. So, you know, the DAX which was down well over 1% for the day, ended down to 40 basis points. Euro stocks was also down close to 1%. They finished down 30, so not a horrible day, you know. But really, where the pressure was overnight, and then spilled over to Europe, you know, Asia, and then into Europe. So, you know, all in all, just to kind of give you a look at how the DAX finished. You know, always good to look at these international markets. So, you know, pretty well off the lows, which I think is pretty good. So, still in a downtrend. If we kind of just blow this out again, it's good to look at other markets besides the U.S. So down into the 50-day moving average. You know, again, I think this got a little bit extended. You know, look at how far the DAX was above the 50-day moving average. You know, so it's a check back. And I think people, you know, are getting, you know, a little bit this morning. We're getting a little bit excited about seeing a lot of red across the screens. You know, it's just something that we haven't seen in a while. But I don't think there's really anything unusual about moving back down and checking back to the 50-day moving average after being really overbought for a while. So that's overnight markets. You know, and that's kind of where we were this morning. And you know, right around the open, we had some volatility. I think the VIX got up to close to, I want to say, I think it was 14 and a half. It was, yeah, 14 and a half. The first, it kind of gapped up on the open, and you know, you could see that we really gave it back pretty hard between 9:30 to about 11 o'clock, but we still are not giving away the uptrend. You know, so this is the VIX. If you kind of just look back the last, I think this is the last 10 days, it's been in an uptrend. So it hasn't been able to really break this. You know, it broke it briefly here and here. You know, this white line, which is like the 200-day, which shows up on any chart, is just drawing a nice trend line here. So again, we're not breaking it. We're not moving. So you go back to the daily chart and the VIX. Again, I don't look at the VIX every day, but you know, it's certainly been in this uptrend. So when does this break, I guess, is the question. And if you go into over to the S&P,
Workday built for the future.
You know, what I've been noticing is that, you know, through those last like 5 or 6 days, is that we are bouncing. I mean, you could see these big wicks and these candles, right? It's not a complete red bar. Like the body of the candle is not a full body. We're not closing on the lows. We're getting bought, but then even the dip is getting faded. So, you know, just to look at the 5-day chart, you know, so we had this ugly open. You know, pretty much heavy move down, but we bought it right back up, but then we stalled out, so we could not get into the value, and having the value areas on my charts really helps. Like, so for example, if you look at Nasdaq, you know, that's as far as the Nasdaq went. You know, big ugly red bars on the open, and it moved back right into the bottom of value. So these are really good to tell you what kind of day you're in. You know, if you could get above, you know, what we want to see, obviously trading wise, is to, you know, be able to overcome this and make a reversal. So that's Nasdaq. Looking at the Nasdaq charts. So we're just not. The conclusion here is basically we're not out of the woods yet in terms of this move down here. And again, it hasn't even been that much. I just would rather, and I've said this a couple times now, you know, IWM looks the worst of them. And again, IWM started to come back pretty nicely and possibly show a reversal day, and that got squashed as well. You know, that actually did get into value. If you go to the hour bar, there was a little bit more, but same thing, big red bars. This was down 1%, finished down 40 basis points. So, there was definitely some things to trade, but if you go to this 1 hour bar, and I posted this on Twitter earlier, that we could not get into the value area for the week. So that's where we stalled on that. And that was the first sign that I saw right around 11 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, ugh, that doesn't look so good. We tried a couple times to fight back. We just we don't have the momentum to do it right now. One other thing to look at, and then I'll kind of give you my story about why I think this is occurring. But bonds, well bid. This is the hourly chart. They did start to sell off, like as equities gained a little bit of steam in the morning, but they finished on the highs, so that doesn't really give me such a great feeling. The TLT finished up 1.1% all the way to the top of value, so maybe that's an area that we might pause at. It's definitely something to watch tomorrow, but again, some good strength. I did not notice that level earlier, but yeah, that looks like the top of value, and that's last week's high, which is where we stalled out last week in the TLT in bonds. So again, a lot of back and forth, a lot of chop. This is, I've been talking about this for a while. Bonds and gold, I've just I don't think there's any real trade here. It just looks like chop to me, but that's another conversation. Just something that I watch every day, because it's a good proxy to tell you where risk is in the market, if there's more of a risk on or risk off. But in terms of trading, I'm not really trading any of these.
Knowing who I am based on my face. No, I don't like that. Yeah, I just want to pay with my
so
what you need to know for tomorrow's
a couple of things. So I could tell you what my market stance is, and then we'll go into option activity, which was huge today. So I've got a bunch of things to go over there, but why I think this is happening is it's basically what I said yesterday in last night's video. I think the market is kind of just being held captive right now by whether or not this tax deal goes through or not, and I think that was evidenced by right where we started to dive and get stymied here at the end of the day. There was a tweet out saying that I think a senator, is it Rob Johnson, or I may have the name wrong, but made an announcement that he is not going along with the tax plan, and that was the big red bar that you saw there. So of course this unfortunately the market is being affected by these headlines right now. And I think it's going to be that way until it gets until they figure out what is going to happen. Now, I think there is light at the end of the tunnel, but it could just be, it's almost like just rip the Band-Aid off. If this tax plan isn't going to go through, I would rather them just come out and say it at this point now and have the market react to it, and then I think buyers will come back in. And that's so for now, until I think Thanksgiving, which I think is going to be where they make the announcement, or maybe just right after Thanksgiving, depending on what day of the week it is in terms of when when they say this is going to be announced. But until then, I think trading a little bit lighter. There was a couple trades that I put on that I took off at the end of the day because I just don't want to wear that risk overnight. It's just a little bit. There's a little bit more risk than I would like to handle, especially for short-term trades. We saw a nice Wendy's trade, which Wendy's is in a big downtrend, so I think this is a difficult trade anyway. Big Wendy's calls came up a couple times today, but again, the name's underneath the 200-day moving average. Who knows? Maybe they know something. But in any event, kind of a tricky trade. But I think until now, I think trading on a little bit on the lighter side, keeping your position size smaller, maybe going out a little bit further, because the further you go out in options, the more likely you are to weather the storm. If you're in front month and the market turns against you, it's very hard to recover that premium. So that's kind of how I'm playing, just a little bit more conservative. And, we'll continue to do that and kind of, until we start to see the VIX really get out of that uptrend for the time being. But you can see I actually had to shrink down use a smaller font for today's option activity. So besides that, I'm kind of talking a lot about some negative things. Really nice move out of the banks today. Reversal. BAC. Oh my goodness in terms of call buying today. That was the first trade that we saw today was BAC calls, and they just kept on coming and coming and coming and coming with calls being bought. So I think the first one was at 9:42, and we called that right in the trading room, and they just cut. This is 11:24, 11:20 more, 9:37 I guess maybe was. Oh, this is for a penny, but yeah. So I've got several of these trades written down on my recap. There was about 4 blocks that went up through the first couple hours of the day. So, and again, you know, we use technicals as a good place to kind of take profits. You know, we hit this VPOC here. I think that would have been a great place to take a target and then maybe take the rest of your position either at the end of the day or take another target at the end of the day. But really nice. Citigroup also, which I'm holding, had a nice reversal day. I actually added to Citigroup once I saw the BAC calls. I did not actually want to just get into another bank right now, so I just bought Citigroup calls on the low, and that ended up being a really nice trade, and that was sent out as an alert. Micron, you know, every time there's a dip, it seems like they come into Micron. Alibaba, which I also took as a day trade, and then at the end of the day, I structured it into selling put spread. So, you know, why did I do that with Alibaba? Why have I been looking for calls in Alibaba, which I mentioned pre-market? Because every time, you know, this is another name that's been great to play on the dips. Every time this thing comes into the 50-day moving average, it gets bought. Here, got bought. The 50-day moving average, by the way, is the purple line of my charts. Here it got bought. Here it got bought. Here it got bought. And let's see if it gets bought again. So I love buying, going long, strong names that are in big uptrends. So that worked out for a nice day trade today, and then I also sold the put spread for December and send that out as a member alert at the end of the day. U.S. Steel, that was mentioned on the halftime show. As said, they scrambled into some calls for next week. Very short-term trade. Nasdaq, which had a real nice day today. You know, I think the stock exchange, the exchange stocks have been doing very well. CME stalled out, which I was very disappointed in. I'm long CME. I think got a report that there's an issue with Bitcoin and one of their exchanges where CME is going to list futures on that particular exchange, so they're going to have to straighten that out. So now we get into where it gets really interesting. Look at all these DXJ calls. This is the speaking of international markets, so, you know, this is, if we go back for a minute and just look at this.
In some ways of yesterday. So earlier in the day, we did have stocks down.
You know, here was I'll talk about the reversal day that we saw, first of all, in the Nikkei about a week ago, which was here. Big, you know, big move up, and it's been just a decline after this high volume day where we started to go higher and actually closed lower. So that was your reversal day in the uptrend. But if you kind of overlay this and use the actual ETF, which is what they're buying, you can see that we are coming into the 50-day moving average support. So again, reversal day, big volume, and now some call buying. So look at these calls that went up. So there was a big block that went up around lunchtime today, which was 1158, 10,000. I'll check open interest because a lot of these do have open interest on them. But look at just 4 minutes before the close, another 9,900 of the DXJ 58 calls going up. So 58, 59 is right here. I think that's definitely possible if this thing wants to turn around. But somebody's really buying Japan off of this move that we've had the last week. A couple other trades. I would say the next trade. There was also more Wells Fargo trades. There's a couple energy names. Energy still underperforming today. No bounce in that today. Those ETFs were down about 1%. XOP, XLE. Then I would say EA. This is so two other things. So one is EA. They continue to buy calls. In this one, we've seen calls now a couple times in EA, and they went in twice. Sweeps. February 115 calls.
The board were incredibly overbought. Tech in particular was incredibly overbought. And so far, the
also, the January calls, one of these they went into twice, I believe. I think it was the February 115 calls. But again, a lot of buying in this one, and they started buying this right after they reported earnings about a week ago. And it really hasn't done anything, but they keep coming after this. So I did put on a position too in EA. I had January calls, and I actually put them out further to a June call spread because I just don't want any of this short-term exposure. It's just too much, too volatile to have all, either December or January, which is the majority of what we see, right? We see, just like I talked about with DXJ, we see a lot of December, a lot of January calls. I just don't want to be stuck with a portfolio that's all loaded like that in the first couple months. You have the market moves the wrong way, and you could really get crunched. HUN, I thought this was interesting. They've come in a couple times, but they saw there was puts in HUN about a week and a half ago, which I think they played very nicely. They bought puts in here, and now they're starting to buy a little bit of calls back now that it's dipped. So it's kind of coming into this support. Now we'll see if that 50-day moving average, but I like the HUN. I couldn't take every trade. Autodesk reports next week. They bought calls and sold puts. And then this is the other interesting thing that happened today. Take a look at the names that I'm highlighting here. They're all semiconductor names. Maybe except for Light. I'm not sure. I forget what Light does. Is Light a semi name?
As technicals do to oversold conditions, which will be a buying opportunity most likely.
Whoops,
now, Abigail, when you take one step back and you look at tech sectors more broadly,
no, this is a hardware name, right?
Well, right now there is some strength
more of an optical name, but nevertheless, they came in a couple times. Clack, name that's, the semis were as a group were down 1%, so they bought some Clack today. They bought some this IPHI. I think out of all the charts, this thing looks really interesting, right on the 200-day moving average. So really aggressive trade. This thing went from when they bought ended up being a really nice trade. This is where they bought the calls in IPHI. Again, not a name that I was really familiar with. I had to actually look to see what it was. These were January 40 calls that were purchased. Nice chunky trade, $580,000. They bought calls here, and it went from about $39.40 all the way to $40.14. So keep an eye on that name. There's a couple other names that they bought as well. Maxim, which we saw calls, I believe a very small call buyer about a week ago in this one. And I like this chart too. You've got your defined support. It's sitting right on the top of the November value area. Let's see if it bounces from there. Another name to watch for tomorrow. Last of that group was another name that I'm not that familiar with, XPER. I'm not even going to show you this one because I think the chart stinks. And then somebody actually, one of our members actually brought up this name before the call buying happened, but SPPI. Real nice move. One other, I guess I'll leave it here. I know this is a longer than normal video, but there's a lot to talk about. Look at this move in GBT. I am still holding a position in this one. Real nice move. They came in and bought calls 2 days ago. Really sneaky, right before the close. That was on my recap. This has been a real nice biotech name in an uptrend. So this name was up 8.8%. Also, I know people are getting excited about certain names like YY. I just own the whole piece. The whole KWeb ETF. YY is in this one, up 1 point. This was actually the best performer of the day in terms of groups of stocks. This is the KWeb ETF, up another 1.1% today. All right, so that's it for today's recap. Have a great night. See you tomorrow. We will be doing, by the way, so look out for on my Twitter feed. You'll see the invite. We're doing a webinar tomorrow. All of the greatest option trades and charts of the week. So I think that'll be really good to kind of recap. That'll be tomorrow after the close, 5 o'clock Eastern. Look out for the invitation for that. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.